Well, thanks for joining me. I'm here with Mike, attorney in Fort Worth, Texas. You focus on? Do you focus on probate and estate planning and everything else in between?
Yeah, so no, one, appreciate the opportunity just to chat, get to know you as well, and hopefully provide some content here that people will find helpful and help them as they kind of navigate different aspects. I'd say as far as our law firm, yeah, for me, my personal experience, yeah, I've done a lot from. I kind of started off in oil and gas. I also was very late to the game. I was in law school kind of during the heydays of oil and gas, right when
Yeah,
attorneys were doing a lot, and that's a very cyclical market. But what it did, it gave me a really good exposure to real estate because it really has a lot to do with contracts, a lot to do with real estate. So that's where I kind of cut my teeth, was on the tail end of that, when things were getting frankly just kind of ugly with oil and gas leases and property
nice.
rights, mineral interests. And so that's where I started. That also got us into litigation. From our firm, we pitch ourselves basically as, hey, we're here for all of your life choices. So we've got kind of set three different areas that we tend to focus on as a firm. I tend to focus on litigation and probate and estate planning, which kind of gets all wrapped up into one, to be honest. We have a lot of it is kind of the same linear process that we go through. My partner handles a lot of the family law side, and we both have attorneys who work for us here at the firm. And so again, depending on what people are going through, and frankly, they all kind of overlap, right? I mean, you
Yeah,
have, whether it's family law, it almost always involves property. So it's, how do we divide things up? And so like I said, we work together a lot because everything kind of overlaps. But yeah, it is. Real estate can be, great. It's a huge market. Obviously, it's just we see the cycles that it goes through, and right now we're kind of obviously on a downward as far as values, and the market has slowed a ton over the last several months. So we're seeing houses
yeah,
stay in the market longer. And so again, I've always been an advocate. No matter what the market, there's opportunities depending on what you're looking at, right? Whether that's single family or multi-residential, there's opportunities out there, and we see that. And again, I'm sure you've experienced the same thing with your career, right? Where you see those the market fluctuations. It really is. You got to be kind of aware of that, and hopefully look for factors. Obviously, we can't predict everything, but there's some good factors you can kind of look at to indicate, hey, here's where we see this going. Here's what we anticipate is going to happen over the next several years.
yeah. It's funny about the landman stuff is I, uh, I I was selling condos downtown Fort Worth, and a big group of people came in for Chesapeake, and they all needed to rent a condo.
Right.
In like 2009, I was like, and I did not want to answer I got a flood of emails, and I just was not looking to rent them. And it ended up, I rented five of them to different landman and the boss, and I got a job with them when the downturn of '08. So I was actually doing landman stuff in Grand Prairie for
Okay.
almost 10 months, and it paid pretty good. I mean, I think it was like 250, $300 a day to go out and just get leases signed.
Get at least signed. Yeah. No, we
Yeah.
had some fun experiences. I speak Spanish, and so we'd have some of our same thing. Our lease guys would go out and they'd get to areas that were predominantly Spanish speaking, and so that was always fun because they're trying to
Wow.
communicate depending on the area. Sometimes it was you want to educate the person you're talking to, and if they can't. If there's a language barrier, that creates a challenge. So I'd go out with them, and it was funny because obviously I don't look like I speak Spanish, and so it would surprise a lot of people when I'd start talking to them in Spanish and having fun there. But no, it really was, like I said, that there were some real positives that came from that. A lot of people were able to sign leases, and again, most of
That's
us we're never going to touch our mineral interest, right? We don't use it, and so it put some cash into people's pockets and helped them,
Yeah, that's pretty cool too. My wife speaks Spanish, and I hope to God my boys pick it up because
right?
it's so beneficial when nobody knows that you speak it and they talk. There's so many times I know they're talking about me on construction jobs. I just
It
know
it
it.
is fun to catch people off guard, and same thing. So I've got four kids. Kind of go spend a little bit ago. So I've got four, and so when they were little, my wife is the same thing. She's like, you got to teach them Spanish. It's so helpful. And so, we have some of our like kids books and stuff in Spanish. So I'd read to them at night, and so they picked up a little bit. Probably not as much as my wife would have liked, but the oldest two are in high
That's
school and they're
cool.
taking Spanish, and it's pretty fun to hear them. They're probably better than I was in high school. Honestly, I don't know that I was particularly great about studying, languages, but they've done a
Yeah,
good job. So it's been fun.
that's cool. So tell me, do you have anything that you're kind of working on in the estate planning space now? Do you have any big cases or anything that you're trying to develop or expand on?
Yeah. So, I try and tell people, it's really not reinventing the wheel necessarily, but it's adapting, right? So we kind of look at what's going on with people's, with property rights, with their interests, with their assets.
Yep.
And one of the things we do, like I said, we do a lot of litigation. So I see, frankly, the downside of not preparing. And so we work a lifetime to accrue our assets and build those up. And then what happens when we pass, right? And I think Charles Barkley said it best: Father Time catches everybody, right? So
Yeah.
no matter what, we're all going to pass away. And so what happens to your stuff? And the sad thing, I think, for me is one, it's not just the monetary value, but we see siblings who will never talk to each other again after all of it, because of the discord and the fighting that goes on. And that to me is just, it's 100% preventable, right? We can plan, people will plan ahead, then they can stop that. I mean, we've got cases again going on. We do all over, primarily North Texas. We go to Houston and Austin and San Antonio as well as needed, but we do primarily North Texas, and we see just a lot of contention and a lot of fighting. And again, kind of give just a quick background. I can go into more details as you want. So, if you have a will
Please.
in Texas, we have the opportunity to do what's called a self-proving will. And so if you talk to an attorney who knows what they're doing, they can draft that for you. It's, I wouldn't say particularly complicated. Now there's larger states, small states, but for most of us, we're just normal people, right? And so we just need a normal small state. And so it'll name a couple things: who's going to be your executor and a successor in case that executor predeceases you or for some reason can't serve. But also say what happens to your belongings, right? How are you splitting things up? Is it going to your spouse? Is it going to your kids? You can name anybody within a will. You can get percentages, you can get set amounts. I mean, you can really dictate how you want your things distributed, including specific bequests, what we call them, or specific gifts. So if I say, hey, my neighbor has been really good to me, he wanted to borrow my power tools, so you know what, I'm going to give my neighbor all my power tools. You can do that, right? You can be very specific. Or again, you can go back to general, say, you know what, I want my kids to split it evenly, and that's it. And so again, if you do that, we do what's called self-proving, which again, for anybody out there who's not familiar with it, there's a ton of information on it, but essentially you have two disinterested witnesses who will watch the person who's creating the will sign it. A notary is there as well. They sign it and has a self-proving clause, an affidavit in there that everybody signs, and the notary just stamps it and signs it. If you do that, Texas considers that self-proving.
Mm.
So it's a real easy process. You do the application, you present the original will to the court, set it for a hearing, basically, right? And so you can move through it very quickly. The executor is appointed. They have full authority to distribute the estate and take care of things. It's again about as easy to lay up as from a lawyer standpoint as you could ask for. Now
Nice.
we have the other side of it. And again, I'm happy to go into more
When
detail. But if somebody doesn't have a will, then we go into intestacy laws, right? We go into heirships. And I tell people all the time, it is a much more expensive and a lengthier process. And that's where we usually see people fighting about things. So again, kind of the quick and, nuts and bolts on that one. You have to file an application to determine heirship, and it doesn't matter if everybody knows that he had left behind a spouse and three kids. The court doesn't know that, so you have to determine that. So you file that application to determine heirship and to appoint an administrator, and then you have to have a third party attorney ad litem appointed as well, which is an additional cost. And that's going to vary by county, but you're looking, it could be $600, could be another $1,000, and that just comes out of the estate. And so everybody's
Yep.
losing more money that way. The third party then will interview at least two disinterested witnesses. They go through different online search portals to confirm. And like I said, most of the time, everybody already knows who the heirs are, but the court has to do that by the estate code. And so they put together a report. We have a hearing just to prove up who the heirs are. And then we get to the really hard part, which is who's going to be the administrator. And there's a couple ways that can go. That can be everybody agrees on it and says, yep, mom's going to be the administrator. Everybody signs consent. That one's fairly easy. So it typically happens. Most of us have that one sibling who wants to make things
Yep.
difficult. And so they file an
I already know
objection.
the one in my head.
It's sad. I mean, I've got we see 7 or 8 siblings and 6 of them agree. And it's one
Yeah.
that just cannot, for whatever reason. And we try and explain, look, I'm not here I can't force anybody to do anything, but at the end of the day, they're probably, it's going to take longer and cost the estate more, which again means less for everybody all the heirs. So
Yep.
again, if you can consent, great. If not, we have to prove it up, and the court can either do what's called independent or dependent administration after that. And huge differences there. The biggest one with independent, essentially the administrator has the authority to then, kind of like an executor, go through and administer the estate. They have to give an accounting of everything, and then they do a distribution. If it's dependent, it's far more difficult. They have to get court approval to do everything. I'll give you an example. Case I have right now. We've got a stepfather, and then he's an adult son, and they can't agree. And so we've got dependent administration. And so he wants to sell the car. First, you have to file to get approval by the court saying, hey, I want to sell this car. Here's what I think it's worth, right? And then you have to list it. You get somebody who wants to buy it. You say, hey, judge, so-and-so, I have somebody, a buyer, they want to buy it for this much. Can I get your approval? And the judge signs that order. Then you sign it and have to turn everything in saying, hey, judge, I sold it for this amount. So you've got 3 steps just to sell one vehicle. And so again, that when it comes to homes, as you know, depending on the market, sometimes that can be a game changer where it takes
Yeah,
so long to get approval that the buyer may move on.
absolutely. It seems like we're getting the discounts now for people, but it's the timeline it takes to get a buyer approved through the courts to get a house that sometimes they just don't want to wait because there's, right now we have a lot of inventory out there. So it's like, why wait on this one if I could just buy this one for 10,000 more?
Exactly.
So,
Right. And half the time, that 30 days, you start seeing a significant reduction. Right? I mean, we see it all the time. If it's on the market more than 2 weeks, we're already seeing price cuts. And then 2 weeks later, another price cuts.
yep,
Buyers know that, right? And so some of them are willing to wait it out. You may be sitting there waiting, you have somebody who submitted an offer. It's 30 days before you get approval. And guess what? In that 30 days, a similar house has dropped 30 grand, right? So they rescind, they withdraw their offer and move on to that next one. So, like I said, this is all preventable is the sad part, right? And like I said,
yep,
the biggest thing that hits us, like I said, I see siblings, see parents, and surviving, surviving spouse or step parents, and the contention that comes from it gets ugly and gets dragged out. I'll give you an example of a case we have that we're about wrapped up finally, but the individual passed 4 years ago. It's pushing almost 5 years ago, and they filed
wow,
in. And part of the challenge there is we've got 3 siblings. They don't all have the same parent. We've got a common law spouse. We got a lot of different parties involved in this, and they all had different attorneys originally. They've all since let go of those attorneys and brought different attorneys on. And so I was kind of last one to the game. So we came into about a year ago. So again, this is 3 years into fighting about this. And the sad thing is the estate total. I mean, it's in Dallas. It's the property itself is worth more than what the house is. So it's going to be demoed. It's going to be a cash buyer is going to come in and tear down this house and build again, probably a $1.2 million house, somewhere in that ballpark. Those are kind of what the comps are looking at if they do that. But again, as a cash buyers, they're not going to pay 1.2 million. They're going to buy it for
no,
250, 300, put a
yep,
$500,000 house on it and make a profit, right? Somewhere in those numbers. And so you're looking at the estate is only going to get maybe 250, $300,000. So you've got 3 kids who are fighting about that. And now for 4 years, they've been spending money on attorney's fees. And one thing that a lot of people don't know, the estate code allows for attorney's fees to be recovered first before a distribution. So again, depending on if the individual paid their attorney directly or did it on a contingency basis, those attorney's fees may come out before any of the kids get paid. And so you're looking at after 4 years of fighting, you can imagine the attorney's fees. And so the
yep,
kids are going to walk away and nobody's going to be happy, right? We make the joke, the only people that are happy are the attorneys. And in this case, it really is true, right? They're the ones who have
yeah.
blown through this estate. And so when I came on, that was kind of my initial thought. I sent it to the other attorneys, said, guys, what are we doing here? Right. Our clients are not going to be happy at the end of this. So like I said, we're able to work out a family settlement agreement is what it's called, which will save everybody some money and put some more back in the pockets of all the kids.
Have they even attempted to sell the property yet?
They haven't. So that's one that we actually have we're having the approval here pretty soon. We agreed
Yeah,
on an administrator. That was another one. We got a third party administrator. So the administrator is going to take their fee as well. Obviously, whoever buys it, again, it's going to be a cash buyer, but I'll let you know because it really is. It's going to be a
yeah.
good opportunity for an investor to come in because again, looking at the comps, even both properties right next door, same thing. They came in, tore down the properties and built a new, just, beautiful,
Yep.
beautiful home there.
I'm working on one right now in Greenville, Texas. The family tried to sell for almost 2 years at $100,000 higher than what they're actually walking away with now.
Right.
Went through 4 buyers,
Wow.
and they finally just realized to just take what they could get after all this time wasted. Now,
Right.
and 2 years ago, the market was, it was kind of hot still. Not anymore. Right now,
No.
we got, right now, Mike, we have 4,700 homes in the market.
Wow.
That's double the inventory of 3 years ago. May have to correct me, but I think it's 4,700. But there's usually around 2,500 homes in Dallas Fort Worth
Right. Any given time.
any
That's
given
why
time active.
it's a terrible time to be a seller for sure. No, and it's interesting. I got a similar case. Like I said, family law ends up overlapping into real estate all the time. And I just had one same thing. It's been very contentious. Well, saying again, we've got a house that's kind of the last piece of the puzzle. Neither one would agree on selling it. They neither one
Mm,
can afford it at this point, and neither one actually lives in Texas anymore. They both moved, and so we've got this property
wow.
sitting. It needs to be sold. So about 6 months ago, the judge finally said, "I'm done. I'm appointing a receiver to sell the house, and then the funds go into the registry and they'll get distributed." Right. So
Mhm.
receiver went out there. It was actually probably closer to 4 months. The receiver went out there, and one of the parties, I'll just say, was being very difficult, like coming back in the middle of the night, changing locks, turning off utilities. Which when you're trying to sell a house, it's Texas, right? If there's no air conditioning,
Yeah.
buyers are not very interested. So it caused significant delays. And again, they were wanting to reduce the price. They kept saying, no, don't reduce the price. We think it's worth this much. Another one has got solar on top, which, if you know real estate with a lot of buyers, that creates a lot of heartache, right? They a lot of hesitation. And especially when you got a market that, like you said, that is as saturated as it is now. Yeah, I'll go on. There's probably a similar home in the same area with no solar.
Yeah.
They just don't want to deal with that headache, of what the challenges could bring, right? The unknown is scary, right? Long story short, they reduced the price, 0 walks, reduced the price again, finally got 1 walk, no offers, reduced it again. Now it's been on the market almost 90 days.
Yep.
Finally got an offer. They had 1 offer on this house after 90 days. And so from the receiver and the realtor standpoint, appraisal came in spot on. I mean, within I don't know if I've ever seen it this close. It was like $1,000 more than what the offer was. It's
That's
a little
good.
more than Zillow. Yeah, like I said, I don't know if I've ever seen a an appraisal come back that spot on.
We're
And
starting to get
so
hit about 15 grand off.
yeah, usually, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's one of those, hey, we got a great appraisal. We've got it matches with again from our, if you're in real estate, you understand that prices change. What it was a year ago is not what you're getting today, and that's what I think these
All right.
two individuals had kind of had their mindset on. And if 2 years ago they had agreed and just sold it, they would have made significant profit. But unfortunately, where
Yep.
we're at with the market, it just dropped. And so they're both mad, and they don't want the order to be approved. And of course, as a client, they're our clients, so we advise them. But at the end of the day, if they're just adamant that we do things a certain way or oppose something, we have to do it. So we went down there. The opposing counsel was same bucket as us. Probably advised her client, hey, this is a bad idea. The judge is going to approve this sale. And of course the judge did. And part of his comment was like, you take it off the market now when it's under contract, you take it back off, from a selling standpoint. One, the realtor's still going to get paid, the receiver's going to get paid, so the parties have to come up with that money. And then from a sales standpoint, again, if you're a buyer, you see it come off the market, that's a big red flag, right? Why did it
Yep.
come off the market? Why is it back, or why is it back on the market? I say, why did it come out of contract?
It kills
So
me to change the status of any house.
it is
It
rough.
it it kills me because everyone's asking more questions than if someone's going to look at a property. Why did you change the status of even if you accept an offer and it goes back on the market? It's such a problem to get people past that objection or that condition.
Right.
It's not,
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. Especially, and like I said, when there's another house very similar, most likely
yeah.
in the same price range, hey, this one didn't have that issue. Let's go look at that one, right? So again, and depending on the market, and that's we get spoiled at times, right? When handful, not even too long ago, 3-4 years ago, like you said, it was people were buying them sight unseen, right? We had such an influx from California, from the Pacific Northwest, from the Northeast.
Yep.
In fact, my neighbors, they never even looked at their house. They saw it online, but they came from California, paid asking for it and moved in without. That was the first time they saw the property. So we get spoiled in those days. We think that's normal, right? And it's not. We have these periods, these ups and downs in real estate, like most markets, and unfortunately, we're not in a buyer's market right now. I'm sorry, we're not in a seller's market right now.
Right. It's definitely equal out a lot,
Yeah.
especially with the inventory. Back to how do you when you collect your fees for something like that 5 years long in Texas, we go through the title company, obviously. So how does the money go into some trust account with the attorneys to disperse?
Yeah, it's a good question. So essentially, with an estate, there is either an administrator or an executor, depending on if there's a will or not, right? So there's somebody who
Right.
has authority to act on the estate. So they actually will set up a bank account for the estate, and so when it goes through the sale, the title company will transfer directly into that bank account. So it doesn't go to the attorneys, doesn't go to the court, it doesn't go to individuals. It'll go into that trust account with the bank. And then from there, again, depending on dependent, independent, again, what's going on from there, there's a distribution. But that's why I say that the estate code in Texas allows for attorneys to recover their reasonable fees first. And so
Yep.
depending on, again, if you have contingency, or what the bills are, if the ad litem had to do more work, they get paid typically first, unless there's some good reason. And typically in Texas, we look at it, was it filed in good faith or bad faith? And that doesn't mean that you win, right? You could file believing that you're right. And after going through it, you discover you're wrong. And again, a kind of an example I gave you there, we had one where we had an existing will, and then literally on their deathbed in the hospital, they signed a new will, right? And only one sibling was there. It changed who got what, and the witnesses were hard to find, is what I'll say at the beginning. And the notary, we couldn't get the notary to contact anybody, and so
Wow.
it looks suspicious, right? You're sitting there going, they were in the hospital, and so we filed against. They had tried to use that one will, which excluded all the other siblings, and this one sibling who was there is the only one who got everything, right? And so they filed back and said, "Hey, no, we had a notary, we had witnesses." And even after we fought about it, the court determined that their application, while the will ended up not being valid because they lacked capacity, was the biggest thing. The court did not find that it was done in bad faith, which you would think, right? Exactly.
Wow.
You have the same. I was floored, right? And so they said, "Look, no. At the end of the day, the dad, he signed it, but he didn't have capacity, didn't know what he was doing. They didn't think that the son had actually coerced him, but." And so it was found that the attorneys really did not file it in bad faith. So they got their attorney's fees out of the estate. And so even though their client got hosed, I say, their client was kind
Yeah.
of the bad guy in all this. And so the attorney still got paid. And that's why I go back. It really can be very frustrating to go through that, from, again, a litigation standpoint, a time standpoint, the amount of time and money we put into it, it's not always worth it. And so our consultations, when people start telling me, "Hey, I want to fight this, I want to go through it," I say, "Hey, I get it. You're riled up right now. How are you going to feel in 2 years or 3 years if we're still fighting about this?" Again, depending on the county, depending on the situation. If we can come together at the beginning and reach some kind of resolution, say, "Hey, guys, we can fight about this. We can all spend money. We can all, have some late nights, or let's do kind of what's reasonable." And again, that's a hard thing to do sometimes. There's a lot of emotion obviously that goes into it. You lost a, parent or a sibling or whoever. And so you're dealing with that loss on top of dealing with possibly, another sibling who's misbehaving. So that's a challenge. I get it. But like I said, I try and be pretty, as transparent as I can with our clients.
And still, you sound like a good closer. I hate to say that, but you sound like you know how to. It's just leading the person into the right decision.
Yeah.
I guess that's where my success comes from, because you get a lot of people just don't know how to lead people, and it may be, and they may initially get upset, but in the long run, it actually saves them a whole bunch of money to lead them in a way to make that best decision. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny because I actually don't like sales. I've tried it a few times. I was not very good at it. And I
Really?
think part of it, I didn't like whatever product I was, pushing, as I would say. And so
Yeah.
to me, it's one of those, I'm really not trying to sell anybody something. To me, it's, again, you're gonna go through this most likely. You're gonna need help. And so I try and just lay, like you said, exactly that. Be as transparent, lay out, "Hey, here's a lot of scenarios. I've done this a lot. I've seen a lot of people who, they're like you said, they're mad at the beginning. They're ready to fight. 3 years later, they're not happy, right? Even if we
Right.
win, they're still not happy because now we've blown through so much time and money, and those feelings kind of settle down at some point. And so that's where it's hard, right? Because again, I get it. You're mad at a sibling or whatever. Now, again, at the end of the day, I try and tell them, "Look, is it worth the spite of your sibling? Is it worth losing? Is that worth the money you're going to spend on it?" All right.
Yeah.
That's really the question. At the end of the day, do you want the money in your pocket or do you want the money in my pocket? For most people, they'd rather
That's
keep
a
it in
good
the.
point. Yeah. That's a really good point. So what happens if someone initially reaches out to you? What is your process to get them in the office? Do you do Zoom interviews? What's your process?
Yeah, I'll usually do a consultation, just a free consultation. We usually try and do this in about 30 minutes or so. Most don't take that long. Again, done this a long time, so they're usually not particularly complicated where we need more time. And then, yeah, I'm old school. I still like to meet people. Again, we do
Yep.
Zoom interviews and conferences. We have people out of state who have, a parent who lived here, so it has to be probated here. So I'll do
Yep.
Zoom interviews, but I always like to have people, "Hey, if you want to come in," I like to shake hands and meet people because, again, I'm just, I guess, an old guy. So, I always appreciate that.
Same here.
It,
Yeah.
you know, it does make a difference to me knowing who I am, again, knowing I'm a real person. I'm not just, just calling you to haggle. But yeah, so that we'll have them come in usually, or if they're comfortable doing Zoom, we can do that as well. We'll send them an engagement letter. And we try and do, again, a lot of times I tell people we don't have necessarily flat rates, but again, having done this a long time, we kind of have, "Hey, here's our range where, 90 to 95% of the time we're within this range." And so I try and give that up front, let them know, "Hey, here's what to anticipate." Now, again, things could take a crazy turn, which they do sometimes. And like I said, we're fighting for 4 years, right? And so
Yeah.
that's gonna, I tell them, look, that's a decision you have to make if that's worth it to keep going. Like I said, on some we don't do necessarily a contingency, but we will do sometimes like a delayed payment because we get clients who, what, I don't have any money. So, but we've got a bank account. We know there's money in there. We've got a house that we can sell. So we know that there's some assets that we can essentially be collected at the end of it. So from an
That's really
attorney
nice.
standpoint, it's fairly low risk, right? And so we'll talk to them. We try and again work with people and be pretty flexible. Whether it's part of it down front and then monthly payments, we do those as well. We don't have any kind of interest or anything like that. We're just trying to help people get through it. So again, and sometimes it is, hey, the client says, hey, I've got no money, but my mom had this house. I just need to sell the house. Okay, let's get you through this. We'll get it done and we'll collect it on the back end.
Yeah.
A couple things we do there, depending on them, we usually we'll try and have them sign something saying, hey, to let the title company know, hey, when you release the funds, you're going to release, X amount to us and then the rest to the client. Again, depending on the situation, right? That really kind of varies depending on what's going on, if it's contested or not, right? If everybody's on the same page, it's not an issue. So, like I said, we try and be pretty flexible with people and understand, hey, we're just normal people. A parent or sibling, somebody passed away, probably didn't have the money saved up to hire an attorney. So we want to be
Right.
reasonable there.
That's pretty cool, man. I haven't heard that from anybody I talked to yet. So, I mean, to have that opportunity, I need to add that to my. So, most of my business is helping people on the other side of probate. Now, after doing it 5 years, I've gone from every type of sale in real estate. Now it's mainly catching people when they get their letters of testamentary. So,
Right.
that's actually a good question to ask. Do you owe your attorney any money? We need to we need to put that in there as an interview question. Sometimes we're like, "Hey, can I get all the money in my account
Right.
and not give it to my sister?" Like, I don't know, don't yeah.
Right. Not your answer, your question
No,
answered.
I need to back up and slow down on that question. Yeah. I
Yeah.
had one guy recently, we bought the house from a lady that was in Georgia, and she wanted to be very quiet about it, but she was the executor. There was no liens on the property, and it took her 2 years to sell the house. And the one thing that pushed her over was just the utilities from the Northern Hills. They kept putting notices on the door, but she never told the brother that she was selling the property. So we closed on it. This is in May. He changed the locks twice on us after
Oh,
we
really?
bought the house. Yeah.
Because he doesn't know it's been sold.
He doesn't know it's been sold. He thinks people are just moving stuff out. And we left one Sunday night and came back Monday morning, new locks. And then we couldn't. We're like, what the hell is going on? Did the city do it? I was like, I've never had
Right.
the city change the locks before. And then I sent the lady a message and said, oh, my brother probably went over there. It's like, well, why did you going over to change the locks? We gave you the money.
Right.
Anyways, I've dealt with every scenario possible, man.
I'm
So
sure.
probably sounds like you too. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and that's what I say. You see, it's pretty wild to see what people will do, and like I said, a lot of it is preventable. Again, we all have that one brother, sibling, or whoever that
Yeah.
makes life a little more fun. So, whatever we can do to prevent that's always good. But yeah, we're big fans of transparency with that too. Like I said, the courts, this sounds, I don't know there's a lot of attorney jokes, and frankly, I always make the jokes. I do a lot of voir dire. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but when you do jury selection, it's called voir dire, right? And
Okay.
so I'm kind of the
Teach
same
me.
way in the courtroom. Yeah, the same way I am in the courtroom with you. Like I'm just just kind of open and just kind of talk, right, and share with people. And one of the things I always kind of lead off with, or a lot of times lead off with, hey, raise your hand if you like attorneys. And of course, nobody raises their hand, right? And I'll point out, you know what, the other attorneys and the judge didn't raise their hand either, right? None of us like attorneys. Uh, and so
That's good.
it's unfortunately really true, right? And so I make that joke knowing that there's plenty of attorneys that I'm not necessarily a fan of out there. And we really do try and be different. I'm from Fort Worth. I'm born and raised right here. So, to me, I
Nice.
went to school, went to college here, and went to law school at SMU. So I'm local, and so to me, it really is. For whatever reason, I got a big sense of pride in being here, and love DFW, and really take pride in the Metroplex. So again, to
Very
me,
cool.
these are neighbors, these are friends. We do a lot of work. We get a lot of just word of mouth referrals because we just really do try and just take care of people because we know they're already going through a lot, right? And like you said, they're already dealing with family members, they're dealing with the loss, they're dealing with all these different issues, and so their attorney shouldn't be another challenge, right? And so we want to be reasonable and work with them.
What would you say that would help someone to avoid a court battle in the state?
Yeah, so going back to that self-proving will, right? So if you've got two disinterested witnesses and the notary who were all there, all signed it and saw the individual. And I always tell people sometimes, we have this where somebody goes into the hospital, right? Something's, they
Yep.
either know that they're going to pass away or going under surgery. And so something may happen there. And I always tell people, hey, you definitely want to have a witness there who can testify to their mental clarity. Because that's, again, when you want to contest a will, there's really only a few things you can do. You can talk about the lack of capacity. So again, they had dementia. They didn't understand what they were signing. They didn't know what was going on. Coercion is another one. So they've got, your brother is whispering in their ear, "Hey, do this, or I'm going to pull the plug," kind of thing, right? And that's a pretty
Yep.
extreme example, right? But you get the point, right? There's some kind of coercion there, and so that is where those are kind of the two main issues we would fight if we think a will is improper. And so again, what you want to do if you've got a sibling or sorry, if you've got a family member who's in the hospital, they want to sign a will, you want to try and have a disinterested witness who can be this. So again, not your husband or your kid, somebody who really is disinterested, who can, if they need to, talk about the mental clarity of that individual. And one of
Yep.
the surprising things, that can even be somebody, we have people, they call it a moment of clarity, people with dementia, with Alzheimer's, people with different, mental diseases that do take that tax on their mental clarity. They have these moments of clarity is what it's called. And so they could kind of, if you talk to anybody who has a family member, they will talk about these moments where they wake up and recognize the individual. And then however long that may last, they may slip back into it. And so that's those moments we want to talk about. If you have a witness who can testify, no, at this time I talked to them, they were coherent, they understood what they were signing. They kind of interviewed them and had that. Ideally, a medical professional, if it is a medical issue, right? Somebody, a third party who can come in. I'll say most hospitals do not want their nurses being those witnesses, so you could ask them to be in there. Now, you could subpoena them, you could go down this if you have to, but that's why I say if you can hire a third party or somebody with medical experience, you can come in and say, yeah, I was there in the room, I saw them, I talked to them. Here's the questions I asked them, right? Do they know what's their name? What's their date of birth? Why are they in the hospital? And if they can answer some of those questions and don't have trouble remembering those things, that really helps in those issues. Again, ideally, they've done it before, so it's not it's not in the hospital. It's done before. That's the number one takeaway I would say is, you never know when that's going to happen, so don't delay. Find an attorney. I will caution people. There's a lot of downloadable, wills out there,
Yeah.
and a lot of those are not self-proving, and a lot of them end up becoming invalid. And so that is a huge challenge that I think people, hey, I paid $200 and went to a website and filled out some information. It spit out this will and we signed it, right? Or we did different things, or you hand wrote in part of it. All of these things actually create problems in the long run. And so again, there's a lot of attorneys out there who will do a will for frankly a very reasonable price. And so, you can find one, have them actually draft it themselves. That's my number one takeaway. Because if you do that, very high, very low risk that you're going to have to fight this out in court.
What is the typical cost for a will, a trust, non-revocable trust? What does that typically look like? Is it hourly wage or is
No,
it a
most are
flat rate?
flat rates. Most attorneys I know, including us, we do it at a flat rate, and most attorneys are. And I've seen probably the younger ones who are maybe a little less experienced. A lot of people have, frankly, a lot of attorneys have software that spits it out for them. To be honest with you, there's different software programs people subscribe
Yep.
to.
Same
Um,
with
you know,
us.
yeah, yeah. For us, we've kind of crafted our own over the years of different things that we've seen that we like, and so we've got kind of our template, is what I'll call it. And again, it has different, depending on the person. We'll change that based off what their situation is. But I've seen probably anywhere from the range for an attorney, probably on the very cheap end, three or $400. If you have a big estate, if you have a more complicated issue, you could easily spend 1,500 to 2,000. Again, depending on the level of attorney that you're talking to, how much you're going in. So there's a pretty broad range. Again, we try and be transparent. In fact, if you actually go to our website, we've got all of our costs, our flat rates listed for all of our estate planning, and it kind of explains what everything comes. But if you just want a simple will, here's our rate for that. If you want a medical power of attorney, financial power of attorney, you want some people call it a living will. It's basically your last request, right? What kind of heroics do you want the hospital to perform, right? Do you want a DNR, do not resuscitate? Do you want
Yep.
if there's no the doctor's opinion is that there's no chance that you're ever going to wake up or recover. Basically it goes through those details, right? What do you want the hospital to do? We have those packages. We go into, is it you and a spouse? Is it just you? Do you want to trust as well? And I'll say no. I think a lot of TikTok and YouTube and different things, trust has kind of been, having a trust has been kind of the flavor of the week, is what I'll say, but it's been that way for a while. I think most people frankly probably don't need a trust. Again, it doesn't hurt. It's not a bad thing. I just think, you're looking at probably on an average trust somewhere between $1,000 to $2,500 for a trust. And so the biggest thing there, most people say, hey, you can put your house into a trust, which is true, right? Put your house into a trust. That way, as you know, because when you pass away, everything kind of stops and goes into probate. Ideally, we want to get out of probate. We want to skip probate because we don't have to go there. We don't have to mess with any of that. But you can do that without a trust, frankly. Again, depending on your state. And that's where when someone calls me, I really do try and dive into their specifics,
That's a good point.
because some of them it is the right thing, right? We want to do that. They've got sufficient assets. It makes sense. And so we want to have that trust account. If not, like I said, there's things you can do payable on death, right? You can transfer on death deeds even with your property. And so again, if that will bypass probate completely. So if you've got a transfer on death, then with the moment you pass away, it automatically transfers to whatever you named in there. Never sees probate. That person is now the rightful owner of that property, right? The same thing, even bank accounts. People don't realize this. You can have a payable on death on your bank account. If you put another person on your bank account, they have access to it. But when you pass away, they will automatically, in most banks, I would clarify with the bank, but in most cases, they will assume full account ownership, right? If not, if it's just you, for example, you could name a payable on death. So when you pass away, you've got it's essentially like naming a beneficiary. And so you could do that with your bank account. Cars is probably the number one question I get. A lot of people want to know about cars. I rarely would recommend putting a vehicle into a trust. Because what'll happen, your trust, think of it like a business, right? So if you got your home in
Yeah.
there and auto, if you get in a car accident, that opens up that house to whatever liability you have. So if you're responsible, they could go after that house. It's not no longer a protected asset because it's in a trust. It's not in your name. So it may not be, they may not find it a protected asset. And so that can create problems that you were trying to avoid. It creates additional liability. Again, I see some people will set up multiple trusts, right? I've got one house in this trust, one house in this trust because they rent them out, and that's fine. Again, that's why I say it depends on your situation, right? So we would trusts, can own property, they can manage properties, and so it's essentially a living entity, right? You can set it up like a business so it survives you.
That's cool. So who keeps all that paperwork then?
So we'll file it. We'll give the original back to the client. So they've always got it. We actually have a book we give them depending on what all they do. We
Okay.
tell them, hey, one thing, make sure this is in a safe place that somebody knows about, right?
Yeah.
Because people will put it in a safety deposit box or they'll stick it in a safe and nobody else knows the code. Again, you're trying to protect it, but if nobody else knows the code, they're never, they're going to have to hire a locksmith to come in and get it, may not even know what's in there, right? And that happens. We'll have cases where we've gone through that administration I told you about because we couldn't find a will. And then there's a
Mhm.
safety deposit box at the bank. Well, until an administrator is appointed, it's hard to get into those safety deposit boxes unless we believe there's a will in there. Again, without getting into too much of the legal, context, there's a way to do it, but it's
Yeah.
more complicated. So they'll open up that safety deposit box. Lo and behold, there's a will, right? So we've gone through all this process, and at the end of it is
Damn.
when we discovered this will. So like I said, if that's one, either have somebody who has a second key and give them authority to get into that safety deposit box, or again, if you have it in a safe or somewhere secure, just make sure somebody knows where it's at so that when your time comes, they can get access to it.
For a long
And
time,
that's
the
the biggest
attorneys kept them, right?
for a long time, yeah. And again, I think
Yeah.
part of it just people move so much now, and so I think that's part of it. And we offer that. We actually offer it where it's stored off site, so it's in a secure facility. It's bonded, so should something happen and it burns down, they actually will. It's protected by insurance. So we offer that as a resource as well. Most people don't. Again, it's one of those. If you do, you just want to make sure somebody knows who to contact, right? Because
Yeah.
if we're storing it at a warehouse and it's safe there, and you pass away, nobody knows it, they're never going to call me out of the blue and find it. So
No.
we'll always keep a copy there. Again, there's only one original. This is what sometimes people, I think we get this question quite a bit. There's only one original. So if I have two of the exact same wills and you sign, first copy, and then a moment later you sign the second copy is the actual will, right? There's only one true original, right? And so
Okay.
the moment I sign that second one, it rescinds the first one, even though it says the same thing, right? It rescinds all previous wills. And so there's one original, like I said, either we can copy, but we'll file a copy with the court, the county as well. And what that does, if it gets lost and no one can ever find the original, you can actually still prove up a copy of the will. It's not too much more complicated. The biggest thing is whoever the two witnesses are, you have to have at least one of them come and testify that yes, I saw, John Smith signed this on this day. I was there, and it's got a notary stamp already. Without one witness, and then another one who can testify that yes, I recognize the signature, which usually that's the applicant. And basically what it just means that, for example, if your brother came and said, yeah, I recognize your signature, right? With that, as
Yeah.
long as well as the witness who actually saw them sign it, that's enough to admit a copy of a will.
I've come across a couple house sales that they pull out the will and it's not signed at all, and they think it's the will all the whole time. they'll send it to me and there's no signature on it.
Right.
Yeah.
Now we'll get those, or the other one will get it where they'll have signed it, and then later on they go and scratch things out, right? And that's another one that you can amend a will, but there's a proper way to do it. It's called a codicil. And that means, hey, you know
So,
what? Yeah, codicil. So you're going to say, hey, instead of amending the whole thing, there's just one paragraph. You know what I'm doing? For example, a lot of times what it is, it's usually a change in beneficiaries, or it could be a house. It says, hey, I listed this house, but guess what? Most of us don't live in our house. I think what's the average, like 5 to 7 years now, I think.
yes, even
And
less
so
now. Yeah.
yeah, and so people move more often than they used to. So a lot of times they'll list their property. Well, guess what? They moved, and it still lists that property going to so and so. So they'll do a codicil saying, "Hey, paragraph 3, I'm revising it, so now it says this." And so it literally replaces that one paragraph
Hmm.
instead of having to redo the whole will. So you can amend wills. Again, it's kind of the same process. You do the amendment. You have 2 witnesses and a notary. That's a valid codicil. One of the things I will caution, because I've seen this too from clients, they'll have their child be one of the witnesses, like an adult child be one of the witnesses. So the witnesses do have to be disinterested. So again, if you
Okay.
if you are an heir or a beneficiary within that will, you should not be one of the witnesses. And so again, a lot of times we ask neighbors, to come out, somebody who has no interest in being, is not a beneficiary, has no interest in it. You want to make sure that happens, because we've had that where we had a codicil, but it was the 2 children who were the beneficiaries, who were the witnesses. It's invalid, and there's nothing the
Mm,
court can do about it. It doesn't matter that that's what the mom wanted. The court cannot admit that because it's an invalid codicil. So it went back to the original version as if the codicil never happened.
interesting. Wow. Wow. All the little things you don't think about.
Right.
Interesting.
And this kind of goes back to my earlier point, and this is why I think you should talk to an attorney, right? Because there's so many little things that, if you're just downloading a form or handwriting it or whatever you're doing, yes, we can fight about that. That's a whole nother, we could probably have a whole nother hot podcast on
Yeah.
handwritten wills, right? Because they do still happen. But again, the point is, yeah, if you just talk to a competent attorney, have them do it for you. Again, if you're spending $600, even $1,000 on it, personally, I see the other side. I see how much money gets spent on the litigation side, and you're going to
Yeah.
save your children or your spouse. You're going to save them that headache.
Other than all the school you went through and all the cons you dealt with, where do you contribute where all this experience come from for you? Where do you like when you think about it, like, man, I'm glad I did that at that point.
Right. So I'll be
It's
honest.
like,
I actually served what probably is my personality most. I served a mission for my church. I spent 2 years in Argentina. That's where I learned Spanish, and so that's a big part of it. Just learning to talk to
wow.
people, right? I think
Yeah.
that's what kind of part of my core of who I am. I mean, 2 straight years I was gone right after high school. Was gone from
Interesting.
November of '07. I'm sorry, November. I'm not that young. November 2001 to November of 2003. And so again, that to me, it was a great experience of learning again who I am. Right, I was 19, so really young, but being kind of thrown into the world and having
You're a little bit
to
young as me. Yeah. Wow.
right, having to serve people. So that's a big part of, I think, my personality. Frankly, again, that's part of why I try and be as candid and honest with people, because that really helped me see, again, kind of a bigger picture. You grow up here in the United States, and we are extremely blessed. You go to
Yeah.
these other countries where poverty here is not the same as other countries, and so that's a big part of my personality, as well. And again, like I said, I just I'm a huge sports advocate. I still play hockey. Actually, I still think I'm young, so I play they call it a beer league, but it's an old man's league. Uh,
Nice.
it's fun, and but I make a lot of comparisons with sports. I really do think sports helps build teamwork and chemistry. You end up working with people you may have nothing really an interest associate with, but I always think sports is a huge way to help bring us together. A lot of my best friends that we're still good friends, and we come
Oh
from very
yeah.
diverse backgrounds. And we've had people make jokes that we've all been in each other's weddings, and like we still hang out. And you see our kind of hodgepodge group. We're very different, right? And so to
Yep.
me, it's great because you learn customs and different things like that. And so you really come to respect. I think again, that's kind of part of who I am, and why I try and regardless of who we're talking to, I'm going to treat them the same way.
It's amazing in those other countries that people what they aspire to have, and we have it so easy. You know,
Absolutely.
I spent a year in Japan with the Marine Corps, and they're mainly what was it? They're a decade behind us, and they like their music was a decade behind us. Their clothes,
Yeah.
they wanted the jeans from our. Nowadays we have all these jeans we wear, but back then it was all Levi jeans that they couldn't get over here
Right.
or over there. It's
Over there.
yeah, neat. Neat.
Yeah, it's funny. We see the same thing, again, music references, the pop culture things that would come
Yeah.
out. You're right. They're a
Dave
little bit
Matthews
behind.
Band.
So it's right.
That's all they played over there. Oh my gosh.
That's so
That is
funny.
crazy. Yeah.
That's cool. No, I love that you're a veteran. I never served, but I come from. I actually have a brother and a nephew. They're active duty in the Air Force. I know it's not the Marines, but they're
Don't
active
worry, you come
duty.
across very disciplined. You're fine. Yeah.
Right. But yeah, my dad was Air Force. I grew up. Like I said, we were born all over. I'm the youngest of five. My oldest sister was actually born in Germany. My dad was stationed over there, so she was born there. And then I had one
Wow.
brother born in Missouri when he was stationed there, and then two in Utah when he was stationed there, and then he was sent down here to Fort Worth, and that's where he ended up spending his last tour or his last time. And so I was born here. So yeah,
Wow.
grew up military family. My granddad was Navy. My brother-in-law is a Marine. He's actually Marine, so he's got some, I'm sure, some wild stories like you.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're big fans of the military and big advocates. We when I was in law school, actually, we had pioneered a program to help veterans be able to receive the benefits that they're entitled to. Because frankly, and I know this isn't really our topic, but I'll just go on a quick
No, it's
tangent if I can.
perfect. Yeah.
But no, it really is one of those things where we have a lot of servicemen and women who come back and they have resources available, but they just don't know it. And so we started a pilot program to help them be able to connect with counseling, connect with resources, connect with treatment, because there are resources out there, and it's just one of those tragedies to me that soldiers come back and get kind of lost in the mix again without getting
It took me 5 years,
yeah.
Mike, to get back into so. I mean, I got a job immediately with the police department, but you just don't like one of the early reviews I got. The client said I thought Dave was gonna shoot me with an M16, not literally, but the way that I was so rigid back in the day that they just
Right.
thought that I was everything had to be it's still that way, but everything has to be a certain order. So,
Right. No, it's very black and white, right? Is what
yep.
I would describe it. And so it's the same thing. Growing up in a house, military house, it was same with us, and yes sir, no sir. I mean, there's certain things that I love from it, and it probably matched a lot of our kind of Texas customs too, or culture
Yeah.
as well. But yeah, no, it is. You see that it is really hard um to reinsert yourself back into population. And we see now we have so many that are having PTSD and so many issues.
Hmm.
They're seeing some pretty, some really hard things to see, and to come back and just go back to, Walmart. It's a pretty major adjustment.
Nobody
So
wants to
that's
hire
one
you.
where,
That's what's sad about it.
yeah.
I mean, you could
No, so like
spend
I said,
5 years in the yeah.
yeah. Sorry, I was just say there's resources there. So that was a really cool thing to be a part of and help start that. So the SMU is, I think,
Yep.
continue to carry that on and try and provide a free resource to just connect veterans and connect servicemen and women with those resources.
That's wild, man. That's awesome. That's yeah. I applied to several places when I first got out, and I finally took a job with Applebee's, and I just left everything off. Didn't even mention the military, and they finally gave me a job as a waiter.
Right.
It's like that's sad.
It really is. Yeah.
It's sad.
You're I hate to use the word discriminated, but you're treated differently, right?
Yep.
Because you're in the military and probably the unknown, and again, people have negative experiences because again, going back, we see, some of whether it's PTSD or just the training that you've had, you respond in a certain way and it may
Yeah.
be viewed as overly aggressive, right? And again, that it's hard to break that training when it's been just drilled into your head for years.
That's right. Yeah, I remember I was a waiter at Applebee's, and a lady fell on the curb outside, and the manager there was like, "Don't touch her. We'll wait for ambulance to get here." And I just it was so hard not to like position her head correctly because I already had that. Not that I've been medically trained or not, but you just know what to do until someone is there to help. And I walked off the job after that because the guy just did not want anybody. He's like, just I didn't walk off the job, but I gave a 2 week notice. I was like, this is not a place for me.
Right.
But
No,
but it,
I would say he's worried about liability, not the person, right?
yeah,
That's the
right.
sad thing. Yeah.
That's right. Exactly true. Yep.
Yeah, well, it's funny. My dad, so he was, like I said, after he was done with the Air Force, he was an RN after that, and so he went back, got his nursing degree, and was an RN for my whole life. And so same thing. Whenever we saw stuff, we stopped. Right, he's got a duty now to stop, and so
Yeah.
we see accidents or whatever. We all grew up doing Boy Scouts too, me and my brothers, and so again, not that it's the same
You're
as
still
real
involved in that,
military.
right?
I'm sorry.
You're still involved in the Boy Scouts, right?
I do, yeah. I still volunteer. I'm
Yeah.
an Eagle Scout again. Just I love it. It's to me, it creates A lot. One, it teaches a lot of really valuable resources. I make the joke, if we took a group of 100 kids out into the woods, how many of them could survive for a night? And so it's just I loved
Not
it. It's such
much.
right. Yeah, building a fire, just simple things that to me we grew up doing them,
Yeah.
right? Being outside, fishing, camping, hunting, whatever it is. Things that again, frankly, I think you learn a lot about yourself too when you're put in those situations. Again, it's nothing I would say particularly, overly taxing or overly challenging, but learned a lot. And so, yeah, I try and
Yep.
volunteer with a varsity group. We do high adventure stuff. In fact, we just did a camp for a week here just a few weeks ago up in Oklahoma. It was fun. We had archery and rifle shooting and taught them how to fish and some
That's
other,
cool.
took them on some hikes and stuff. It's a lot of fun. I really do enjoy it. It's again, for me, I know a lot of people in particular who sacrificed and gave time so that, to help me and teach me. And so to me, it's a part of giving back, right? You need to help that next generation grow up the same way.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm trying to teach my son the same stuff, and I didn't grow up fishing, believe it or not. So now, and I just had to learn like 2 years ago. I knew how to fish, but it's not like you don't know everything you need to go out there and do that.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like I had to go to Walmart and I had to figure it out and ask some questions so I wouldn't look like a fool in front of my son. It all worked out. We got to where we were fishing and he didn't want to fish. He just wanted to look for turtles. So it
Right.
worked out good. He's a 5-year-old. So yeah.
You know
And
what?
then they
But
fighting over the worms, not the fish. It's funny.
right. But that's a great experience, right? Something
Yeah.
he's going to remember. You're going to remember that. That's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool, man. Anything else? This is great, man. I'd love to uh, have you back on, or if you think about something you want to cover, you think,
Yeah,
man, because this
definitely.
is, I don't see anybody doing this in the Fort Worth space or Dallas area. And everybody I work with, the biggest complaint that I come across is just the timeline. People don't realize how much time is involved from the first time you start the process of probate and how long it takes the judge to make a decision, or any of the loopholes that trying to get the real estate out of the estate or doing something to speed it up. One he's getting sicker. He just contacted me the other day and he's getting more ill. His wife passed away 5 years ago and he's been in the loop of probate for about 4 years. And it's all because they one of the heirs adopted a kid, not officially, not legally. They're coming of age now. And I guess they had to appoint a litem to the case and they haven't been appointed yet.
Yeah, if you've got a minor involved, then yeah, you have to have an ad litem who essentially represents that minor,
Yeah.
right? And so yeah, that's why I say you start getting into some of these more challenging situations, and that's super super frustrating. And again, depending on what county it is, and I'll give you an example of kind of like if you've got a proper will, you've got a self-proving will in Tarrant County. We had one. They gave us a call. We got them signed up. We did their application the next day, filed it in Tarrant County. They have to do a posting and a citation essentially to let people know that it's going on. This is still antiquated. They literally still put it like piece of paper taped to the county, kind of like doing foreclosure sales. And so they still do that. And so then we scheduled a hearing immediately. And so within 30 days, we had our prove up hearing, got him appointed as the independent executor of the estate. I got what called his letters testamentary is what it's called. That's essentially the authority to act on the estate's behalf. Within 30 days, we got that. He turned around. Again, he had a bank account and a house that he needed to sell. He contacted a realtor. They got it sold pretty quickly. Actually, he wasn't asking a lot for it, so it actually sold quickly.
Hmm.
But we were done. We have to do some things after that. It's called a notice of beneficiaries, a notice to creditors. We handle all that from kind of behind the scenes. That all gets done. We filed that with the court. We were actually done so quickly. We usually file a kind of a closing letter with the court saying, "Hey, just let the judge know we're done. There's nothing else that needs to be done on this estate." And the clerk emailed me back and said, "Hey, you can't do this within the 90 days of filing the application." That's how fast we were, right? So
Wow.
again, that's the difference between if you've got a self-proving will,
Yep.
and that's Tarrant County, they're moving pretty quick. Parker, Wise, and they're very quick. Just a warning. Dallas is inundated with cases. It's a huge county.
It's huge.
Yeah, there's 3 probate courts in Dallas County, and again, not none of their fault. It's just the number of cases that they have. It takes a long time to get a hearing. I mean, we're asking for hearings now, and they're getting put in October. So we're just sitting until October. Nothing we can do. We
In
just can't get in
Dallas.
front of the judge because
Wow.
and so if you have something that's contested, we're having multiple hearings on it, it's going to drag out because if every hearing takes 3 or 4 months to get set, then we're looking at, years is what ends up happening because it's taking so long to get anything productive done. So again, that's a little caveat there. Depending on the county, that's a major factor. But most of the counties are pretty quick, especially when it's self-proving. And so, yeah, that's from a timeline perspective. The difference again, an airship is a totally different story. I tell people we file that application, it goes through the same notification process. Then an ad litem gets appointed, which usually the judges don't require a hearing on that. We just file a motion, they'll appoint an ad litem. That can be a big factor depending on the ad litem. We have some who are really quick, within, like I said, they'll call people, they'll do their interviews, do all their research. Sometimes it's 30 days, they're ready to go. We have others where they just have a really busy docket, and so their schedules are packed. It takes them a long time. Uh, I'll say we push nicely is what I'll say on our side, right? We
Yeah, I
try
can
and
tell.
speed them up and say,
Yeah,
hey,
that's cool.
what's going on here? What's an update? What do you need? What can we do to help? Did you contact them? Knowing, we'll talk to our clients knowing they haven't been contacted. So we'll put the bug in their ear. But again, sometimes those take 6 months of just the ad
Wow.
litem. We have some cases we have to have the ad litem removed because they've been non-responsive. So now we're filing a motion to replace the ad litem, right? So again, that can be very frustrating. So you see a wide range of these cases, and that goes back those if you have if you have a correct self-proving will, you don't need an ad litem. You skip that whole process. So again, it's definitely my experience worth the money to do that up front.
And the ad litem is just another independent attorney. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, the court
Yeah.
appoints them, and they have to go through a process to they have to do some additional continuing legal education, and they submit an application to the county, and they kind of get put into a registry of the ad litems.
Okay.
And so the court usually will kind of go down the list and just pick one, who they think either they've had experience with them in the past, but it could have like I've had this where one ad litem, he's like, hey, in the last 2 weeks, I got appointed to 12 cases. And so each judge doesn't know that because a couple were in Tarrant, a couple in Parker, a couple were in Denton. It's just they were spread out. And so he said it's going to be a minute before I get to your case. So at least he gave us a heads up. Again, that
Yep.
was probably rare. That I don't think that happens too much. It was just kind of luck of the draw that happened, kind of a thing. But again, like I said, they've got their own cases, things they're working on, and so it's nothing personal against them. They're doing the best they can with the time they have.
That's right. I remember helping one out. I just thought of it. Maybe I need to reach out to the ad litems and see if I could do some maybe research or what do you call investigation for them. Maybe that'll
Yeah,
help. I
it's
remember a
gonna.
lady I met in Tarrant County. She asked me for. She thought I was an attorney in the courthouse, and somehow I found the phone number for the person she needed to contact, and we figured it out, and they got the deal done. She wrote me months later saying thanks for your help. So that's cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's great. Yeah, like I said, they're doing research. They're trying to find people, and we did the same thing, right? We try to say, here's our two witnesses. Here's their phone number, their contact information. Here's all the heirs, or everybody that we know of. Here's their phone numbers and contact information. Again, we try and kind of serve it up to them as easy as
Yeah.
possible because you know how it is when something is complicated and you can't find the information. You're gonna try and knock out the easy stuff first. It's kind of human nature, I think, right? So if yours is difficult, they don't have contact. They have to do the research and find these people, and sometimes that happens, right? We have kids, like you said, you have a potentially adopted or a child who was treated like an adopted child. Sometimes
Yep.
that happens. We have heirs out there. We just can't find them, right? And it's so that can drag a case on for sure.
So they're just basically verifying the information you already have, right?
Yeah,
The ad litem.
exactly. And that's where and part of it because there are times when somebody like we had one not too long ago where it was actually her uncle passed away.
Mm.
She knew that it was her uncle and her dad, they're brothers, and there was one other sister. And so we filed our application saying, "Hey, we've got the one surviving sister, and then our client would get her father's portion because he had actually survived the brother as well." And after we filed it, another attorney from Florida filed in saying, "Hey, there's two more heirs out here." And so after we started doing research, turned out that long story short, the uncle, the parents had multiple kids from different relationships, and none of them knew each other. So again, by
Wow.
no fault of anybody, it's just they had relationships and kids were born, and so then to be, I think, 8 kids total from these parents, so they were all related to this uncle, and so she went from thinking it was basically her dad and her aunt her whole life, she's 40 something, and thinking it's just these two, these 3 are the only ones in the family. Now I've got 7 or 8 other uncles I've never even met, some in Florida, some here in Texas, even some in Oklahoma, and so that
Wow.
that was part of the process. Yeah, the item goes through that and does again like DNA. Um, I know they use like Family Search. They've got a couple databases that they'll go through and do their own independent research as well.
That's cool, man. Wow. Okay. Well, we're about to the hour. So, I mean, how do we find you? Do you have a website, phone number? Do you want to give on here?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So our website is it's Themis Legal Group. I know. So it's www.themis, Themis, legalgroup.com. Like I said, we got a lot of good information on there. It's got all of our phone numbers on there, as well as you can submit to get a consultation. Like I said, we put our flat rate pricing for estate planning is listed on there too. So if people have questions on that, they can jump on there. If they want to give us a call, absolutely. We'll set up a consultation.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you for your time, Mike. Appreciate it.
Absolutely appreciate it, dude.
Yeah. All right. Bye now.
All right, bye.
See ya.